Hey there everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be looking at each Wings of Fire tribe's natural abilities in order to determine which is the strongest tribe. Now I'm not looking at this from a societal lens, more just their physical characteristics and abilities specific to their tribe. So just to be clear, even if a tribe is the most technologically advanced tribe, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the strongest. This video is going to be very similar to how I determined the best queens in Wings of Fire, in the sense that I'm going to be ranking them. This time it won't be in a tier list simply because I don't think the ratings are diverse enough, but I will be giving them scores and ranking them from best to worst. So I will be looking at them using 4 different categories. The first is combat, which is essentially, can they use their physical abilities for combat? If so, how deadly is it? And also things along the lines of agility, strength, and just how good are their abilities for harming the enemy. The second category is defense, which you can also probably guess what I mean. Things like stamina, resilience, maneuverability, things that can really help prevent you from getting hurt. The third category is adaptability. So how well have they adapted to their environment? Now I will be counting how well they can survive in environments other than their own, but mainly where they evolved to live in. In this category, I will also be judging things like how well they can camouflage and also how quickly they can travel across and fly across terrain. The fourth and final category is utility. Now, I kind of think of this category as sort of more general in the sense that what else can they use their abilities for? Things like medicine, building, foraging, things like that. Just to be clear, for the individual categorical ratings, a 1 to 3 means that the tribe is weak in that regard, 4 to 6 is okay, 7 to 8 is good, and a 9 to 10 would be very strong. So let's begin. For the order of tribes, I just decided to go in the order that we really explore the tribes in the series, so we'll start with the Skywings, then the Mudwings, and Sea Wings, and so on. So starting off with the Skywings, let's go over all the abilities that the tribe has. They are generally considered strong fighters and flyers, and they can breathe fire. Now, it's probably one of the less unique tribes in the series, simply because it seems like the tribe is based off, classic Western dragons, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad tribe, though. Starting with combat, they are considered pretty strong fighters, and also their huge wings would also be good for fighting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that their claws are pretty sharp, especially if they're always climbing and traversing mountains. And of course, their fire can be very deadly, so I'm thinking that a 9 is a fair rating for combat. Moving on to defense, I don't think Skywings really have too much to defend themselves. Their defense lies more in the offense, if that makes sense. Hurt the enemy before they hurt you, you know? I suppose their huge wings would be useful for quickly getting out of a tricky situation because they can outfly any other tribe chasing them, so I will give them a 5. It's not like they're defenseless, but it's just their offensive abilities kind of make up for it. Now, for adaptability, I'll start with camouflage, and they don't really blend in with anything. They're probably one of the least stealthy tribes considering how huge they are and how bright and colorful they are, so really camouflage is not one of their strong suits, but their huge wings and claws show that they have adapted to living in the mountains, but that's really it. So I'm going to give them a 4. I think that camouflage is a very important part of survival for dragons, and it just isn't there with this tribe. And the final category is utility. Now, of course, they have claws and wings that can be used for various tasks, but if we are looking at unique abilities, fire is really the only one. It could be useful for cooking food or welding weapons, so it's not that bad, so I will give the Skywings a 7 for utility. So with their ratings averaged out, they get a rating of 6.25. Next, we are moving on to the Mudwings. I think the Mudwings are probably the least interesting tribe in the series. I mean, what is the most unique thing about them? They can hide in mud. Wow, that is very interesting. That's the most unique thing about them. And it isn't even that unique, since Rainwings could do that anyways if they wanted to. Perhaps it's that they can hide in mud without being disgusted. Yes, that's it. I got it. That's it. Starting with combat, I mean, Mudwings, despite being uninteresting, are actually pretty good. First of all, in the right conditions, they're able to breathe fire, which is great. Unfortunately, if they are cold, then they can't breathe fire, which is a little bit disappointing, but not the biggest deal in the grand scheme of things. Another huge strength of Mudwings is just their pure size and strength. The Mudwings are definitely one of the larger tribes. That could be considered an advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, but I would argue it's more of an advantage. So I will give them a solid 8 for combat. I don't think you need to worry as much if the Mudwings are on your side going into battle. Now for defense, they certainly have some strengths as well as weaknesses. Starting with strengths, once again, they're very large and also have tough, hard skin, which is sure to be useful for blocking and being more resistant to attacks. However, it could be a disadvantage towards them because perhaps their maneuverability is a bit weaker. Out of all the tribes, I think the Mudwings are like the tank of the dragons. Obviously, they aren't that slow, in fact, they're still fairly average, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say here. Since they're larger, it will definitely reduce some agility. So I will give them a 6 for defense, kind of in the middle, slightly better. And I think the Mudwings shine the most in adaptability because they have multiple traits that are specialized for the swampy environment. For example, they can breathe underwater for an hour. While it's not nearly as good as a sea wing, it's very impressive considering that they are land dragons. And also, since all the other tribes apart from sea wings really despise water, the familiarity with the water can prove to be very helpful for them. Mudwings also camouflage very well in the swamp. If they lay down in a mud pile, they could blend in perfectly, which shows how well they have adapted to their environment. So overall, I will give them a 9 for adaptability. And the final category is utility. While all the other categories have been rather strong for them, I don't see how useful their abilities could be for a non-war or survival-related purposes. To me, in that regard, Mudwings just seem like a combination of Skywings and Seawings, but nerfed in a way. They kind of get a little bit of both worlds. So I guess I'll give them a 2 for that. Alright, so all those scores averaged out result in a rating of 6.25, just like the Skywings. Even though this is probably the most uninteresting tribe, I had a surprising amount to say about it, and you know, they're not so bad. Moving on to Sea Wings now, starting with combat, I don't think Sea Wings are that strong. For hunting underwater, they're very strong, but other than that, not so much. They're really adapted to their own environment, which unfortunately means that they are much less effective for anything else. I mean, they have claws and teeth and stuff, but all tribes have that. When it comes to fighting other tribes on land, I don't think Sea Wings would do very well, so I'll give them a 3. Moving on to defense, I think that the Sea Wings are much stronger in a way. What I mean is that if a Sea Wing is able to escape through the water, then that means they are good as gone, basically, which is great for them. For example, you can see how easily Webbs managed to escape the Dragonets of Destiny's cave using the river. Nobody could chase him. When it comes to physical defenses, they are a bit lacking though, but simply because of their huge advantage with water, I'm going to give them an 8. You may perhaps think I'm giving a good score for being good at being cowards, which yes, you would be correct. But when it comes to defending yourself for survival, you need to do whatever it takes, so I don't really see a problem with it. For adaptability, I'm going to say 10. It's not even a question, really. Sea Wings are the most adapted to their environment that they could possibly be, although maybe except their snouts, because I would have expected underwater dragons to have evolved in a more crocodilian way, but I don't think that really matters too much since they can do everything just as well. But yeah, they blend in with their water environment, they utilize water currents to move around faster, and they have gills, of course, to breathe underwater. They are, without a doubt, the most powerful creatures in the sea. For utility, their physical attributes certainly contribute to their ability to hunt. They're able to maneuver quickly, which is essential for hunting, and also a bunch of other reasons that I mentioned previously in the adaptability category. And also their ability to breathe underwater is very helpful for actually living underwater. You know, there's a reason why no other tribes live underwater. So on the surface, pun very much intended, it may not seem like they have much utility, but actually everything they do relies on their ability to breathe underwater, so that's why I'm going to give them a 9. All of these scores averaged out result in a rating of 7.5, so above the Skywings and also above the Mudwings. Now we are on to Rainwings. I am very conflicted about how I should rate this tribe. I would argue that Rainwings are objectively really strong, except the problem is that we don't really see it that much because the Rainwings literally refuse to use their abilities. I think Glory is the only Rainwing that would willingly use her venom on a dragon. All I'm trying to say is that it's a little bit more difficult to determine how strong they are. So I'll just try my best to separate the type of dragon from the tribe. Starting with combat, their only unique ability that could help with combat is their venom, which, despite being their only offensive ability, still makes them very powerful. If a Rainwing has good aim and is strategic, then they can do a lot of damage to their opponent. Just one shot in the eye and they're dead. And of course they have claws and such, so I'm going to give them a 9 for combat. Again, I want to reiterate that this is based on natural ability, so if we are looking at this from a stereotypical point of view, Rainwings aren't that powerful, but they can choose to be if they want to. When it comes to defense, I think rainwings are a little bit weaker if you don't count camouflage. If you do count camouflage, then they are probably just as good as sea wings, in the sense that they can escape situations very easily. Although I will say something that confused me in the series was how well rainwings can actually camouflage realistically, because in the books it's described like they pretty much disappear and you have to look very, very hard in order to see them. But with shadows and the way that light works, I don't really know how that's possible. Yes, they would definitely be harder to see, but not as hard as the book suggests, I would think, but who knows. I think it's more fair to go with the judgment of the books instead of my own, but that was just a thought I had. So if the rainwings are as hard to see as the books say they are, then I think an 8 would be appropriate, largely due to camouflage. The only reason why I won't give them a 10 is because it's not like they have particularly strong scales or sharp claws, so they aren't really good in all areas. For adaptability, it's an easy 10. While I don't think they are as adapted as the sea wings are just in a whole league of their own, and I don't think this rating system really does them justice, which is why the rainwings and sea wings get the same rating. The rainwings, of course, have their camouflage, which comes in very handy in the rainforest, and also they largely benefit from the sun. While the desert is probably the best kingdom if you want sun, as long as the rainwings can find an open area somewhere in the canopy or something, they are also in a pretty good situation. Also, I just realized this. Isn't it ironic how the rainwings literally depend on the sun despite being called rainwings? Rainwings, really? Well, I get it because it's the rainforest, but you know what I'm saying. When it comes to general utility, I think the rainwings are just about as impressive as the average tribe. You know, they have their niche things, and their niche thing I would say is probably medicine. I don't think that's as much due to their venom and more just the rainwings having easy access to all these different rainforest resources. We actually haven't seen the rainwings do much medical related stuff because the healers in the rainforest are, well, healers. They don't have doctors like our doctors or the doctors in Possibility, so it did make me think that maybe rainwings aren't as good at medicine. Except I think I recall in Darkstalker Legends there being rainwing travelers mentioned or something, and they have unique drugs or medicines or something along those lines. Even if the rainwings just fell off, I don't think it matters based on how we are rating them. Also, they have their venom, which could be good for destroying things, so I'll give them an 8. So the average rating for rainwings is 8.75, which is actually a very good score. It's a shame they don't use their abilities to their advantage. Now we are moving on to the Nightwings. Now I'll start by saying this is my personal favorite of the tribes, but I'll try my best not to be biased here. So their main abilities include Fire Breath, Mind Reading, Foresight, and the ability to camouflage in darkness and shadows. Starting with combat, I think Nightwings are fairly standard for a tribe. They aren't particularly weak at all, but they also don't really have any abilities that would help them in combat that set them apart from other tribes. If we're looking at it from a combat perspective, the Nightwings are essentially black Skywings with normal-sized wings. With that said, I think it's fair to give the Nightwings a 7 since the Skywings got a 9. They didn't get a higher rating because there's simply nothing that sets them apart from other tribes. Moving on to defense, I think that the Nightwings don't have a ton going for them. I mean, they have scales, which is nice, but I think that all they have that's really important is the ability to blend in with the shadows. Being able to hide in shadows, depending on the environment, can protect them quite a lot, actually. Realistically, if a Nightwing is either fighting at night or underground or something, they're going to have a huge advantage over their opponent, as they can slip into the darkness, or flee, or confuse the enemy. It can be very useful. Other than that, there isn't much, so I will give them a 7. I think that their camouflage can be very powerful in certain scenarios, but generally there isn't a ton that can help them. Now, for adaptability, the Nightwings are probably the only tribe in the series, maybe apart from the Silkwings, that don't have an obvious habitat that they are clearly adapted to. To me, it just seems like they're trying to live anywhere they can, because it's not like there's a part of the world that it's in an eternal night. Due to that fact, it's kind of hard to judge how well they adapted, because we don't really know exactly what they were trying to adapt to. My guess is that since they are nocturnal, or they were nocturnal at least, that's what made them evolve this way. When it comes to evolution and genetics in Wings of Fire, it doesn't take a genius to know that it's very unrealistic. With that being said, let's just say that they were trying to adapt for the night. In that case, they adapted exceptionally well, for 2 reasons. One, the obvious one, they can blend into the night sky very easily, and they have the star pattern on their wings, which kind of blends in with the stars, and that also makes it very good for hunting and stealth. The second reason is how they utilize the moons for those special powers, which are mind reading and foresight. Those abilities can be extremely useful, and it demonstrates how they've adapted because moonlight is only, well, at night. With that being said, I will give them a 9. The only reason why it isn't a 10 is because I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible here, and I don't think that objectively it should be a 10. And also, it's kind of a gray area as to what the Nightwings were adapting to, no pun intended. Finally, utility. Of course, fire can come in handy for many things, like cooking and destroying things, but I think that the obvious thing to talk about is the mind reading and foresight. Those two powers can be very useful. For example, foresight can help with planning ahead and knowing what's going to come up and being prepared for that. The situations where that can be useful are pretty much endless. Mind reading can be good for understanding other dragons and also potentially creatures as well, like scavengers. I do think it's worth mentioning, though, that it could be argued that these powers are sort of a disadvantage because, well, the curse of knowledge. And I agree to some extent, but I feel like the good in the utility far outweighs the bad here. I think these powers are very obviously useful, so I will be giving the Nightwings a rating of 10 for utility because what they can do with these powers is pretty much endless. So if we average these out, the Nightwings get a rating of 8.75, a very, very strong rating. Now we are moving on to the Ice Wings. So the Ice Wings are actually really unique since most of their abilities are exclusive to them, unlike other tribes apart from the Sea Wings. The Ice Wings are the only tribe that can live comfortably in sub-zero temperatures and shoot frost breath. They also have serrated claws, which are much sharper than the other tribes, and they are mainly used for digging and gripping into ice, as you might expect. Starting with combat, I think the Ice Wings actually got it pretty good. They have their serrated claws, which, if used strategically, can definitely cause some serious injuries pretty easily. They also have their frost breath, which we have seen in this series can be very damaging. If it hits a dragon on their scales, it's very painful and can take a long time to heal, or in Battle Winner's case, if it hits you in the mouth and goes down your throat, you're essentially screwed. After that, you'd either have to die or live in lava, so yeah, it's pretty powerful. So I will be giving them a 9 for combat. They don't have a ton of abilities, but the ones that they do have are fairly strong. Moving on to defense, I think that their biggest strength is that they can survive such low temperatures. If the Ice Wings really wanted to, they could just isolate themselves up in their kingdom and never be bothered until the end of time, which is what Queen Snowfall wanted. No other tribes are able to get up there, which amounts to something significant. You could argue that they can also swim away, which could be helpful, so I will give them a 7 for defense. It's not like they're vulnerable, but all they really have is the cold and water to help defend them, which can either be very helpful or not a viable option depending on the situation. Now for adaptability, the Ice Wings are similar to the Sea Wings in the sense that they are pretty much as adapted that they could possibly be for their own environment. However, when it comes to the other environments, they are a bit less tolerant than the Sea Wings. The reason why the Ice Wings are so well adapted is because they can survive the cold temperatures, they have sharp claws for moving on ice, and they can blend in with the snowy environment. So based on that, I think that they should get a 9. I don't see how they could possibly be more adapted for the Ice Kingdom. It would just be more ideal if they could survive in other environments a little bit easier. The last category for Ice Wings is utility, starting with Frost Breath. It can be used for cooling yourself down while in a warmer environment, and it can also freeze things. Their sharp claws are also good for building and sculpting, and their ability to swim is good for hunting fish and whales and such. So I will give them an 8 for utility. I think their abilities are pretty useful, but there's nothing that's game-changing in there, if that makes sense. So I think anything higher would be a bit too much. If we average out the scores for the Ice Wings, they get a score of 8.25. Moving on to the Sand Wings, the main advantage that the Sand Wings have is how, opposite to the Ice Wings, they can survive very hot temperatures. They also, of course, have their poisonous tail as well, and they can survive a long time without water. They basically have all the things that you need to live in a desert. Starting with combat, the only special thing that they really have are their venomous barbed tails. Other than that, there isn't really anything worth mentioning, but that's okay because the barbed tail is a very powerful weapon. Honestly, it could be argued that the shape and sharpness of the actual barb is more deadly than the venom itself because sandwings can just impale their enemy easily. But in case they just scratch their enemy, the venom will do its job and cause a lot of damage over time unless it can be healed. Fortunately for the sandwings, the only cure for the venom is in the desert itself. They also have fire, which is useful in battle, but a lot of other tribes have it as well, so it's not that powerful, so it's not as significant. So I will give the Sandwings an 8, since they really have only one ability, which is the Venomous Tail, but that ability is very, very powerful. Moving on to defense, it's not looking great for the Sandwings. There isn't anything that can help them that much. Maybe if the Sandwings are fighting in the desert against another tribe, they would have an advantage, but that's a very specific scenario and probably not that helpful. So I will give them a 3. It's not lower because they aren't inherently vulnerable, if that makes sense, but they just don't have that much to protect them. That sets them apart from other tribes. For adaptability, similar to sea wings and ice wings, they are also about as adapted as they can be. They don't need as much water to survive. They can survive the blistering hot temperatures of the desert, and they can also blend in with the sand, which really, for surviving in the desert, that's all you need. I think the sandwings did a fantastic job adapting to this environment as, well, Tui clearly designed them for it. It's also worth mentioning that sandwings don't struggle in most other environments as well, except for the Ice Kingdom, of course. And also their scales allow them to blend in with the sand and the ground very well, so I will be giving them a 10. Now for utility, I can imagine that their tail barb could be very useful for some things other than fighting. I don't know for sure if this would be safe for sandwings, but assuming they are impervious to venom, their tail barb could be very useful for hunting. Perhaps their bodies got accustomed to the venom due to them using their tail barb for hunting over such a long time, similar to how the nightwings gained a semi-tolerance toward bacteria and diseases on the island. And of course, their fire breath would be useful for cooking and burning things. It's worth mentioning that their bodies emit heat as well, which could be useful in situations where they are in a cold environment and need to stay warm, or taking care of eggs like how Sunny did to Auklet in The Lost Heir. So I will give them a 6 for utility. All these scores averaged out give the Sandwings a rating of 6.75. Now we are on to Pantalon tribes, starting with the Silkwings. The Silkwings are probably the most unique tribe in the entire series, I would say. For starters, they are literally born without wings and need to go through a metamorphosis stage at age 6. They also have the ability to spin silk with the rare ability to be a flame silk and use their antennas to sense vibrations. Starting with combat, the Silkwings are actually pretty weak, and they're described as that quite a lot in the actual series. They have standard claws and such, but no unique or particularly dangerous weapons. If they do have anything, it would be Flame Silk, which, again, it's pretty rare. If they do have Flame Silk, they can use it to burn their opponents, which could be pretty useful, although I would say that Fire Breath might be a little bit better than Flame Silk, kind of depending on how it's used. And they also have a huge disadvantage considering they don't get wings until age 6. So I will give the Silkwings a 3 for combat. For defense, they don't really have any natural defenses either. I don't see how Flame Silk could be useful for defense, and again, going back to how they have a metamorphosis, it is not good that they can't fly at the start of their life, especially since it's a dragonette. At that point, they're pretty much helpless if a predator gets close or something. However, it's not so bad for the adult Silkwing, so I will be giving them a 2 for defense. It's not looking great for them. In terms of adaptability, they're kind of like the Nightwings in the sense that I don't know what they're trying to adapt to. I'm fairly certain that they lived in the Pantalon forests prior to the Tree Wars. I mean, where else would they live? So I can maybe see how their silk could be useful in that environment, kind of connecting between the trees, but I'm also not sure why they have antennas and no other tribes do. Well, of course, the beetle wings are the ones that had them first, but I'm not sure what the original purpose for them was. But I don't recall the Silkwings needing their antennas that much. It's also worth mentioning that their scales are also pretty much every color apart from black, and they can't change the color of their scales. That means their camouflage probably isn't great either, generally. So I'll give them a 3 for adaptability. They have some cool abilities, but I'm struggling to figure out why they have adapted that way and how all of that could be useful. Now for utility, this is where Silkwings are a bit stronger. Starting with their silk, they're able to make interesting weavings and create strong structures with the webs. In fact, they made whole bridges between the hives with their silk. There's so many uses for Silkwing silk. As for Flame Silk, that's even more useful as it can be used for burning things and as a light source. We see how Wasp uses the Flame Silks to light up the hives using lanterns with the Flame Silk inside of them. So yeah, the use of silk is pretty wide and has a lot of opportunities with it. As for the antennas, I can anticipate them being used for improving the senses of Silkwings, as that's what antennas do for real-world insects. So things like better hearing and sensing vibrations and danger, so I will give them a 9 for utility. These ratings average out to give the Silkwings a rating of 4.25. The second last tribe we are going to be looking at are the Hivewings. The Hivewings are probably the most powerful tribe physically on Pantala and potentially just in general. They have fatal stingers that extend from their wrists and venom in their teeth or claws that can temporarily paralyze prey. Their tails also have the ability to spray out boiling acid from their tails. However, it is worth mentioning that not all hivewings have these abilities. It does vary from dragon to dragon. With that being said, I'm just going to pretend like hivewings always have all of these powers because I'm talking about the tribe in general, not just individual dragons. Starting with combat, it's an easy 10. Not even a question. It's quite astonishing how much more powerful the hivewings are compared to the silkwings and leafwings. Hivewings can paralyze their enemies, spray boiling acid on them, inject venom from stingers in their wrists. They have about as many predatory characteristics as you can possibly imagine, and they're probably the deadliest tribe in the series. I think that'd be fair to say. Now for defense, I think their paralysis would be very useful for defense. Of course, all their predatory abilities would come in handy for defense as well. However, their scales aren't great in terms of camouflage. Their scales are described as a combination of yellow, orange, or red with black. If it were black or just a solid color, it wouldn't be as bad, but I can imagine it's hard for the hivewings to blend into their environment. With that said, I still think that they should get an 8 simply because their other abilities are really good for defense. For adaptability, I think it's obvious that they are essentially the dragon version of bees due to the pattern of their scales. For adaptability, I think it's obvious that they are essentially trying to be the dragon version of bees due to the pattern of their scales, their venomous features, and stingers. If the goal was for them to be similar to bees, then they definitely succeeded. The scales also adapted well to be similar to bees, although it could be argued that that's a disadvantage to them, as I said earlier, so I will give them an 8. Lastly, for utility, I can imagine their abilities to be extremely useful for hunting. In fact, it's all they could ever want, really. All they really need to do is touch their prey and then it's already poisoned or injected with something. And of course we can see how useful the paralysis was for the hivewings when punishing the silkwings sent to misbehavior's way. It saved them from making prisons since they could just make the dragons stay still. So I will give them an 8 for utility. So if we average out the scores for the hivewings, they get a rating of 8.5. Okay, so the final tribe that we are going to be looking at are the leafwings. Now, the leafwings are pretty similar to the rainwings in the sense that they characteristically live in trees and forested environments. They're also the only tribe that has leaf speak and the ability to manipulate plants, which is pretty interesting. Starting with combat, I don't think the leafwings are that strong. They have claws and the standard dragon features, but nothing else really. You could argue that leaf speak could be helpful, except it's exceptionally rare, and also it needs to be very strong in order to it to actually be effective in a combat scenario. So I will give them a 3 for combat. It's not like they're weak, they just don't have any upper hands on the other tribes, if that makes sense. Moving on to defense, they don't really have any natural defenses either. I guess this is where Leaf Speak is a little bit more useful, as we have seen Sundew use it to grow plants around and protect the Poison Wing Village in the Poison Jungle. They also have scales, which are great for camouflaging into the forest. Other than that, they don't really have anything, so I will give them a 6 for defense. When it comes to adaptability, the leafwings have proved to be very adaptable to their environment, both through evolution and just changes in the environment where they're forced to move. We saw how the leafwings were forced to retreat to the poison jungle after the tree wars and how they managed to survive in there. In fact, none of the other Pantalan tribes were able to reach them there, so that's very impressive. And of course, they are well adapted to nature. The fact that they have leaf speak reinforces that as well. Their scales are mainly green and brown, which are the main colors that you'll find in forest, which means that they have strong camouflage. So I will be giving them a 9 out of 10 for adaptability. The final category is utility. The leafwings only really have leaf speak in terms of utility, but that is a very useful tool. Whether it can be for growing plants in gardens, or as I said earlier, creating a natural, well, kind of natural defense for your village, there are so many things that you can do with leaf speak, both good and bad. Another example is how the other mind wanted to use leaf speak to spread the breath of evil across Pantala. I mean, that's not a good thing, but if that's what you want, then Leaf Speak would come in handy quite a bit there. So I will be giving them another 9 for utility because Leaf Speak is extremely effective and very versatile. So those ratings averaged out give the Leafwings a rating of 6.75. Alright, so we have fully gone through all of the tribes now, and I will reveal what the final results are going from worst to best. We have 7 places since there are 3 instances where 2 tribes tied in ratings. In 7th place, with a rating of 4.25, we have the Silkwings. The Silkwings' silk and antennas can be very useful, except they mainly fall short due to lack of natural defenses and offensive abilities, and how they don't develop wings until age 6. In 6th place, at the rating of 6.25, we have the Skywings and Mudwings tied. The Skywings are good for combat, but lack a good camouflage and natural defenses, and are overall not as well adapted as other tribes. The Mudwings are very well adapted to their own environment, but they fall short in the utility category. In 5th place, at the rating of 6.75, we have the Sandwings and Leafwings tied. The Sandwings were strong in the regard that they were well adapted for their environment and have very powerful tail barbs, but fell short in the defense category. Leafwings were well adapted to their environment as well and had a big advantage with their leaf speak, which could be used for many things, but they lacked in terms of combat. In 4th place, we have the Seawings at a rating of 7.5. The Seawings are quite strong in most categories, especially adaptability, but fell short in combat due to them being less adapted for on-land combat and lacking the abilities for it. In 3rd place, with a rating of 8.25, we have the Ice Wings and the Nightwings. The Nightwings scored well due to them lacking weaknesses in all the tribes and their unique powers of mind reading and foresight being incredibly useful. As for the Ice Wings, their strength mainly lies in how well they have adapted to the Ice Kingdom and the cold, and they score generally very well in all the other categories with no huge flaws apart from being less adapted to other environments. In 2nd place, with a rating of 8.5, we have the Hive Wings. They excelled in combat due to their wide range of offensive abilities, and they were able to score well in the other categories. And finally, at a rating of 8.75, I can't believe I'm about to say this, we have the Rain Wings. The Rainwings scored well due to their advanced camouflage abilities and their deadly venom. I would like to reiterate that I'm talking about natural abilities here, so not the society. If we were talking about it from a societal standpoint, the Rainwings would be near the bottom. So there you have it. Those are what I think are the best tribes based on natural abilities. Of course, the study wasn't completely accurate as it was based on my own judgment, but hopefully this is somewhere near what the general consensus would be. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching.